Welcome everyone to Gamer Melt. For those of you who prefer not to see this ugly mug every single time you watch my YouTube video, don't worry, I'll be back to my normal videos on Friday. But I wanted to get this out because it's the last day of Amazon's Prime Day, and there's some really good deals that I'll quickly go over, but also Intel is quitting this 14th gen gets more cores. Nvidia hates their own GPU, and they released a new 4090. Okay, it's news time, and like I said before, today is the last day for Amazon's Prime Day sales event, and there's actually some really incredible deals. I'll quickly go over those, and of course, if you are interested in anything that I show here, I will have affiliate links down in the description below. They don't cost you anything more, and it helps the channel out. Either way, starting things off, while yes, that Samsung PCI Express 4.0 M.2 drive was really well priced, this one from Crucial is even better. As you can see here, they actually offer for their Crucial P3 Plus Gen 4, so PCI Express Gen 4 M.2 SSD, 1 terabyte is $39.99, 2 terabytes is $75.99, $76 for a 2 terabyte PCI Express 4.0 M.2 SSD, and then even more incredible, 4 terabytes for $176.99. Really, there's not much more I need to say about this incredibly fast drive for an unbelievable price. Next, if you don't need anything that fast but want to save just a little bit more money, there's actually an external hard drive right here. It's a WD Black 2 terabyte hard drive for just $61.99. Then we have AMD's Ryzen 9 5900X. Yes, this is their last gen product, but we're talking a 12-core, 24-thread CPU for just $274.91. Moving on, if you want something newer, they actually have their 12-core, 24-thread newest gen 7900X for $356.15. Then we have the 12600K, so if you're looking for something a little bit cheaper than that, Intel's last gen 12600K, this is a 10-core processor for just $179. Moving on, we have the Logitech G502 Hero, really great mouse for just $34.99. And lastly, we have the PowerColor 6700 XT for just $299. And what's really awesome is that this also works for their new deal where you actually get a free copy of Starfield. Definitely a very impressive deal, at least as far as GPUs go right now. Obviously, I'd expect it to be even lower given it literally is last gen, but still not a bad deal. And really, these Prime Day deals, even if you aren't looking for new PC components, they really have deals on just about everything. Like I said, I'll have these links in the description below, so definitely make sure to check those out. Moving on, we are getting to more of our normal stories, and first up, I have to admit, this one is at least a little bit surprising. It looks like Intel has exited their NUC business. That's right, their little NUCs or NUC, whatever it is you want to call them, they actually stand for Next Unit of Compute, but they're effectively very small PCs that are actually pretty powerful. Now, they aren't completely stopping the business altogether. Well, they are in that Intel themselves aren't going to make first-party NUCs anymore, but they are going to use external partners. As you can see down here, Intel states, quote, "We have decided to stop direct investment in the next unit of compute business and pivot our strategy to enable our ecosystem partners to continue NUC innovation and growth. This decision will not impact the remainder of Intel's client computing group or network and edge computing businesses. Furthermore, we are working with our partners and customers to ensure a smooth transition and fulfillment of all our current commitments, including ongoing support for NUC products currently in market." So yeah, I do have to admit, this kind of does suck. While I personally haven't been too involved in this, I will say that the product lines were pretty interesting and it really pushed tiny PCs pretty far into the market. But apparently Intel is done. With that said, one thing Intel isn't done with is their desktop line of CPUs. And we actually just got a massive leak that gives us the specs for Intel's 14th gen Raptor Lake refresh CPUs. And let's just say I'm a little bit surprised here because they actually went up a little bit in cores, but I'll get to that in a second. First up, keep in mind that one of the changes that are going to be happening is that they are apparently set to support faster DDR5 memory, potentially up to 6,400 megatransfers per second. Unsurprisingly, they're also set to increase clocks, but the really big thing to talk about here is core count. As you can see right here in 14th gen, the 900 series did not go up in cores, so it's still going to max out at 24 cores and 32 threads with 8 performance cores and 16 efficiency cores, but when we move on down, you'll notice things have changed. The i7 line of CPUs have actually gone up in core count, as well as the i5 and others, but I'll get to those in a second. First, the i7 series moved from 16 cores and 24 threads to 20 cores and 28 threads. Now, they still do have 8 performance cores, but instead of 8 efficiency cores, they now have 12. Then moving down to the i5 series, instead of 14 cores and 20 threads, they now have 16 cores and 24 threads, at least for the higher end i5. When we move down to the lower end ones, we do go right back to 14 cores and 20 threads, but moving all the way down to the lowest, we can actually see that it moves from 4 cores and 8 threads to 6 cores and 12 threads. And actually, with the i5, you'll notice that it goes from 6 performance cores and 8 efficient cores to 8 performance cores and 8 efficient cores. So it isn't just efficiency cores that are going up here. They're also adding performance cores depending on the SKU. When we move down to the lower end i5, they move from 4 performance cores and 0 efficiency cores to 6 performance cores and 0 efficiency cores. So while it is certainly a refresh in that this is likely nothing new as far as architectural, it's probably just going to be more or less bin chips, or they may just push it just a little bit here and there. It is still better than what we originally thought, especially when you get into lower end parts. I mean, the fact that we're going from 16 cores to 20 cores, if anything, this will likely hurt their 900 series of CPUs. Yeah, they are going up in clocks. You can see here that, at least according to this, that the 900K and F model will get all the way up to 6 gigahertz, and they may even release a KS model that gets up to 6.2 gigahertz. Of course, we'll have to get closer to the actual launch, but at least for now, this is one of the first big leaks on the specs. And next up for today, it looks like Nvidia actually hates one of their upcoming GPUs. As you can see down here, once again from video cards, Nvidia has decided not to produce a Founders Edition for the 4060 Ti 16GB GPU. Now, Nvidia not releasing a Founders Edition doesn't really mean all that much, but as it says here, typically Nvidia participates in reviews for their GeForce graphics cards, even if there is no official design from them. Board partners who provide samples to reviewers are required to submit a list of all reviewers and influencers to Nvidia as part of the typical GPU launch process. However, it appears that the upcoming 4060 Ti with 16 gigabytes will receive a different treatment. Nvidia is not actively involved in the launch, apart from overseeing the testing process and regulating when reviewers can publish their results. And in fact, it actually seems to go even further. According to a post from Hardware Unboxed, it states, so the 4060 Ti 16GB is meant to be arriving this month. Word on the street is the 18th. That is what the rumors are that we've seen so far. He's unable to confirm it, but as he says here, every Nvidia partner I've spoken to so far has said they won't be providing review samples, and they're not even sure when their models will be available. And this was right on the heels of some rumors basically saying that board partners really aren't too happy about this card. They don't really care about it. They're not really going to market it and things like that. And according to him, they were basically only releasing it for those who were complaining about 8 gigabytes not being enough for the 4060 Ti. And it more or less isn't. Still, this is pretty wild. It really is as if Nvidia's releasing this GPU and yet they hate it. And that of course means, as you can see here, that there very likely won't be many reviews of the 16GB model, or maybe no reviews at all. It's pretty wild to see something like this, especially when gamers are more excited for the 16GB model than the 8GB model. Yes, it is $100 more, but I would argue it's likely worth that price difference. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. We'll obviously have to wait and see if we do get to see reviews, but it's just odd that Nvidia would release this and just not care about it, like they don't want it to actually sell well. And lastly for today, I do have some good news, well, or bad news sort of, depending on whether you've already purchased a 4090 or not, but basically, if you've been following the channel, and of course, if you haven't, make sure to subscribe to GamerMelt. Either way, if you have been following the channel, you know that Nvidia's been working on a new 16-pin power connector. That new connector includes quite a bit of changes, but one of the main ones is actually on the socket itself that's on the GPU. And that change basically involved shortening the sense pins, so whenever you seated the connector, if it wasn't seated all the way in properly, it just wouldn't get power. And of course, for those who've been following this whole scenario, you know that the likely culprit that was found for why a lot of these GPUs were effectively burning up was because they weren't seating their connector all the way. Well, shortly after we learned about this connector, we found out that Nvidia had actually already included it on the RTX 4070. Well, it looks like they're now putting it on their new RTX 4090s. As you can see down here, there was actually a picture shared on Reddit where someone who had purchased a 4090 had actually found out that they received the new connector. You can see right here that the sense pins are recessed quite a bit into the connector. Once again, so whenever you try and put it in, if it's not seated all the way, it simply won't get power. And of course, I would argue that this is a very important change, especially because it was the 4090s, at least as far as I'm aware, I believe it was almost all 4090s that were burning up. With that said, of course, if you currently own an older 4090 that doesn't have this, there's no way to upgrade it. So it likely does sort of suck given you're effectively an early adopter and you got one with this older connector. With that said, don't forget that the new connector, as far as everything but the socket, is supposed to work on the older socket, so you will get all of those new features. It's just you basically want to make 100% sure that the connector is seated properly and it's all the way in. Regardless, this is of course good news for anyone who purchases a 4090 from here on out. So while that does it for today, why do you think Nvidia hates their 4060 Ti? And what do you think about them now including that new connector on their 4090? Shouldn't they have figured this out from the beginning, or is it on the consumer? Let me know down in the comments below. And don't forget to check out those awesome deals, as today is the last day of Prime Day, down in the description below. And as always, have a great day.